It really is never going to end, is it? So, a couple days ago, I released a video about a particular article that had made its way online, which said various things about what went into the production and creative process of the Godzilla anime trilogy. If you haven't watched it, there are links all over the place. You can find it there. You should probably watch that before you watch this, because I'm just going to go right into what this new information provides us. So what brings us here today is an alternate translation of sorts. Matt Frank, an artist whom you may know if you're a Godzilla fan from IDW's various Godzilla comics, particularly Rulers of Earth, received word from what he calls, quote, a Japanese friend, says so right there, that's the only way he identifies this person, that says the article in question was not completely accurate. Apparently some of the points did come across, but other points weren't necessarily conveyed the proper way, according to this person. So this is just causing the divide to become even wider. Now you've got people who are saying, aha, so the first translation was wrong. Now we know the truth because we got another source. Except, no, I can't really say that I think we do officially know the truth now. All we have is another translation. Think about it for a second. On the one side of things, you have one translation that debuted on the internet forum 4chan, which admittedly has a terrible reputation in general, not just when it comes to providing information, but especially when it does. And on the other side of things, you have this alternate translation provided from an anonymous source secondhand. I wouldn't exactly say that's more reliable. Right now it's just a he said, she said, they said, we said, I said kind of thing, wherein we have two different ways to interpret the same source, and the only way we're going to know which one of those really is accurate is to have someone else confirm one of them. And that's where the issue comes in. We don't know if someone's going to confirm either one of these. For all we know, a third source could come in with a completely different translation, and it'll just get even muddier. Assuming for a moment that we are looking at something which is more accurate, here's the basic rundown. I'll throw the text up here so you can read it all for yourself if you want to. There are 2 pages of it, but I'm not going to read the whole thing this time. I'm just going to hit the highlights. So for starters, according to this, what Seshita said was not actually no kaiju fights, but no monster professional wrestling. That is to say, they didn't want any of the, quote, goofy extended Showa era fights, like the ones in the 70s. Well, okay. I can understand not necessarily wanting to go overly silly with these things, but I think there is a difference, and I'm sure you can all agree there is a difference, between no silly pro wrestling kaiju fights and no kaiju fights at all, even when you promise them. So I think if this is accurate, they went way too far in the other direction. It also says that after Shin Godzilla was such a huge hit with mainstream audiences, Toho did indeed want to target a wider audience. In particular, women and children are cited here, as opposed to just appealing to the, there's that term again, traditionalist crowd. So again, assuming this is accurate, since when has that strategy actually worked? Name me one time it's worked. Ghostbusters 2016, did that work? I mean, Star Wars, current Disney Star Wars, is that working out for everyone? I don't think people actually realize at this point that you don't need to alienate your fans in order to draw in a new audience. What have superhero movies predominantly been doing? They've been adapting the source material more or less directly, making a few changes because you're switching mediums, but pretty much sticking to what's in the books, the stuff that only the hardcore fans would really know. And look at the audience those have. They are ubiquitous in our culture. People who have never touched a comic book in their life, don't even read the funnies in the newspaper, if you still get newspapers, those people are loving these things. People who have never touched a comic and have no intention of doing so, even if they like the movies. You can make these movies to draw in a bigger audience while still keeping your original audience. That way, guess what? You have an even bigger audience. I mean, are people trying to continue this trend because they actually are convinced it will work? Is this like communism, where with this time we're sure we'll get it right? I mean, come on. Now here's an interesting question. Could there ever have been a permanent Godzilla store with satellite stores in the 90s? And if you look at their merchandise, most of it is geared towards women and children, not hardcore fans. I don't really see what that has to do with anything. I mean, I don't know if there could have been a permanent Godzilla store in the 90s. Neither does the person who wrote this. Nobody really knows, in fact, because there wasn't a permanent Godzilla store in the 90s. Could there have been? It's really impossible to say. Godzilla is popular enough that you could potentially say yes. I mean, maybe not, but again, this doesn't really have anything to do with anything. You're bringing it up, and okay, fine. The products are predominantly aimed at women and children. I mean, I'd like to see some evidence of that. I live in America. I can't go to the Godzilla store myself, unfortunately. But marketing Godzilla products to children is nothing new. That's not exactly a revolutionary new idea. It's... What do you think... Hang on. What do you think this is? It's a stuffed animal. It's a toy. It's something that, yes, as an adult collector I have, but this would probably be aimed towards kids too. Or, what about this? This is a kid's toy. I got this when I was a child. I mean, what is the point that's being made by that statement? That it's a store that predominantly sells to kids. It's the most specific Toys R Us in the world. Now it's the only Toys R Us in the world. That's getting off topic. Point is, I'm not really sure what that has to do with anything, because it's bringing up a point that cannot be proven or disproven. I mean, let's be honest here. Godzilla has a large audience. He always has. Even when there's been quiet periods, there's been a large audience. So maybe you could have had a Godzilla store. You can't really prove that you couldn't have until today, because it's impossible to prove. It's pure speculation. Another thing this statement doesn't consider is that maybe the reason the Godzilla store is doing so well is because of the internet. Yes, it's got physical locations out there, but you also have the internet as a ubiquitous thing all over the world. People from outside of Japan can potentially order products from it. So, is that a factor? Or is it just that it's marketing to women and children? It's impossible to prove that a Godzilla store could not have worked in any period other than this one. It just isn't possible. It's pure speculation, one way or the other, so I don't know why this point was brought up. Where this anonymous source really says the translation becomes inaccurate is how the creative team went about making these movies. Because apparently it was Seshita who told Shizuno not to watch the original movies. Shizuno had apparently seen maybe 2 and worked as a director on Neon Genesis Evangelion. But otherwise it was Seshita, the guy who outwardly alienated the fans, who said for him not to watch the others. And apparently all the stuff about Seshita and Urabuchi saying 1 kilometer tall Mechagodzillas and Mechagodzilla turret heads and X-Hips wearing sunglasses were jokes? Just things they said to be funny, but they didn't actually consider? Alright, so it was a joke. They never actually considered it. Instead, they decided to just rehash the ending of the first movie, where they just lure Godzilla into a trap him, and then fail to kill him. Better alternative there, I guarantee it. Yeah, that was definitely worth doing over not giving us something different from the first film. Here's the thing, though. Regardless of whether the original translation or this alternate translation is true, nothing changes either way. At the end of the day, you've still got the anime trilogy as it is, and you've got the people who were responsible for it. That creative team of Seshita Shizuno and Urabuchi, and the Toho executives who hired them. It's basically like the JFK assassination. You can come up with all sorts of conspiracy theories about who was really behind it. The Mafia, the Communists, the CIA, Area 51, whoever, the Illuminati, take your pick of conspiracies, there have been enough of them. But when all is said and done, the only two people you can say for certain had any involvement in the assassination were Lee Harvey Oswald and John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And both of them are still dead when it's all over. So even if you could somehow prove a conspiracy, that's not going to bring either of them back. Kind of a similar deal here. We can try to point the finger anywhere we want to and say this party is more responsible than that party, or this person got that translation wrong, or whatever. But at the end of the day, you've still got the anime trilogy, and the anime trilogy is still terrible. It's a series of movies that never gets above subpar and makes all sorts of mistakes. Knowing where those mistakes came from does not mean they stop being mistakes. I am now at a point where I see the Godzilla anime trilogy as a creature that wants to die. It's been making a whole bunch of bad decisions, it's made no effort to improve itself, and it's been driving the people who care about it away. Those are all clear signs that it just wants to be left alone so it can die in peace. And at this point, I am more than willing to let it. There's just no point in continuing this anymore. We're going to keep getting alternative facts and different translations, and people are going to still try debating who's more responsible for the problems than other people. What's the point anymore? The trilogy has been circling the drain for a while. Now that the last movie is out, it's very nearly out of the sink and out of our lives forever. I just think it should be allowed to wither. Nothing is going to improve by continuing any of this. Regardless of who turns out to be right at the end, the movies just didn't work. I repeat, you can make a movie that is satisfying to the fans and to new audiences. Believe it or not, there are far more examples of how to do that than of how to do something that makes a new audience in spite of your original audience. Why that's become the new model, I will never understand. And no, it's not the fact that they are appealing to women which is bothering me. I would actually like if there were more women in the Godzilla fanbase. What bothers me is the way Toho is going about it. Like I said before, they're using a strategy which, so far, has not worked at all. So, I mean, okay, short term, you might find enough of a devoted fan base to say, sure, it does work. But long term, it's not going to work. Long term, you're going to have people who, in that new fan base, will eventually want to go back and see what all these other Godzilla works are about. And they're going to be vastly different from the movies which drew them in. So either they are going to say, well, this isn't like what I wanted, so I'm not going to bother with anything connected to those other things, and you're going to lose them that way, or they're going to realize that the films which drew them in are inferior, and thus devote themselves to that older stuff, and the newer stuff falls to the wayside. And meanwhile, you've also officially squandered all of your goodwill with the older fans, who will no longer want anything to do with you. So is that really the strategy you want to adopt, Toho? Because I don't think it is. It's very short-sighted. Why can't you just make a good movie? Instead of making a movie designed to appeal to a particular demographic, why not just make a good movie? One that could potentially appeal to everyone. It's not impossible. You can have something that appeals to a new fan base as well as the original fan base. Those two ideas are not mutually exclusive. All you have to do is make a good movie. I again point you towards the comic book movie example. So, if that really is what you want to do, I technically can't stop you. But I can still warn you. As for the anime trilogy, it's over now. Let's just allow it to die in peace. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it as well as subscribe to the channel for more content of a similar nature. Also, check the description for links to our Twitter, DeviantArt, and Patreon pages, as well as the Amazon link for the novel Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, penned by yours truly. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.